In the heart of a bustling subway station in New York City, a man named Joe lived a life that had become as predictable as the trains that rumbled beneath the city. At 45 years old, Joe sat near the station entrance each day, holding out a battered cup and asking commuters for spare change. To most, he was invisible, just another face among the city's forgotten. To Joe, life was a monotonous cycle, a survival game of asking and barely scraping by. One crisp morning, as commuters rushed past, a tall, sharply dressed man paused in front of Joe. With piercing eyes and an air of authority, the man looked at Joe for a long moment before saying, "You always ask for something, but have you ever given anything to anyone?" Joe, taken aback, blinked at the question. He replied, his voice tinged with irritation, "I'm just a beggar. I have nothing to give. How can I possibly give anything to anyone?" The man's lips curled into a faint smile. "If you can't give, you have no right to ask," he said. "Life is about give and take. If you want something, you need to offer something in return." With those words, the man turned and boarded the train, leaving Joe stunned and speechless. Those words lingered in Joe's mind for days. "Give and take?" he repeated to himself. "What do I have to give?" The idea gnawed at him, unsettling his usual rhythm. For 2 days, Joe sat in his usual spot, barely asking for change, lost in thought. On the third day, as he watched the world bustle around him, inspiration struck. Nearby, he noticed a small flower bed growing wild in a neglected corner of the station's plaza. Joe walked over and plucked a few flowers, careful not to take too many. He returned to his spot and decided to try something new. That morning, as people dropped coins into his cup, he handed them a flower in return. At first, people looked at him quizzically, but soon, some began to smile, surprised and delighted by the gesture. To Joe's astonishment, more people started giving him money. The simple act of offering something in return made a profound difference. Encouraged by the response, Joe began waking up early each morning to pick fresh flowers. He arranged them neatly, handing one to anyone who gave him change. Over time, his earnings grew, and with each passing day, Joe's confidence blossomed alongside the flowers. He began to feel a sense of purpose he hadn't known in years. Yet, on the rare days when he ran out of flowers, fewer people gave him anything, reinforcing the lesson that giving created value. One afternoon, as Joe stood in his usual spot, he saw the tall, well-dressed man who had changed his life. Gathering his courage, Joe hurried up to him. "Excuse me, sir," Joe said, holding out a small bouquet of flowers. "Today, I have something to give you. Please accept these." The man's eyes softened as he accepted the flowers and handed Joe a few crisp bills in return. "Now you've become a businessman," the man said with a grin before boarding his train. Joe stood there, the man's words echoing in his mind. "A businessman," he whispered to himself. For the first time, he saw himself in a new light. Looking up at the sky, he declared, "I am not a beggar anymore. I am a businessman." Though passers-by thought he'd lost his mind, Joe felt an undeniable shift within him. From that day on, he approached his flowers as a business. Using the money he earned, he began buying flowers in bulk from local markets, selling them not just at the station but in nearby neighborhoods. He crafted small bouquets, learning what people liked and refining his offerings. Joe worked tirelessly, waking before dawn to gather supplies and find new customers. 6 months later, the transformation was complete. Joe stood at the same subway station, but he was no longer the man holding a tattered cup. Dressed in a suit and carrying a briefcase, he waited for a train. As he scanned the platform, he spotted a familiar face, the tall man who had sparked his journey. Joe approached him with a confident smile. "Do you recognize me?" he asked. The man looked at him closely but shook his head. "I don't think so," he said. Joe chuckled. "We've met twice before. The first time you refused to give me money. The second time I gave you flowers. Back then I was just a beggar." But today, I'm a businessman, heading to a meeting for my flower business. The man's eyes widened in surprise and delight. You're the flower guy? Look at you now. Joe nodded, his smile radiating pride. You taught me an important lesson. We only receive when we give. I realized people weren't just giving me money. They were paying for the flowers I offered. Changing how I saw myself changed everything. The two men shook hands, their exchange brimming with mutual respect. As they parted ways, both felt inspired by the power of transformation. The lessons for today's society. This story highlights the transformative power of giving. Joe's journey from a beggar to a businessman underscores how shifting our mindset and focusing on offering value can unlock opportunities. Life isn't just about taking, it's about contributing through kindness, effort, or creativity. When we focus solely on what we lack, we limit ourselves. But when we find ways to contribute, even in small ways, the world responds in kind. Success isn't about waiting for handouts. It's about taking action and believing in your ability to create change. Joe's story also demonstrates the importance of self-perception. How we view ourselves shapes how others see us. By seeing himself as a businessman rather than a beggar, Joe changed not just his life, but how others treated him. Remember, no dream is too big and no challenge too daunting if we dare to think differently and act boldly. The journey to success begins with a single step and a willingness to give. If you've ever experienced similar stories in your life, don't hesitate to share your thoughts or experiences in the comments below. We would love to hear your story.